Before my sister-in-law's anniversary dinner, I switched the card in my jacket pocket and said nothing. When the $31,400 check hit the table, Claire didn't even look at me. She just reached across, smiling like this was already handled, like it always was, and pulled the card from where I always kept it. The terminal beeped once, flat, sharp, wrong. It cut through the laughter, the glassware, the low hum of money pretending not to notice itself in a private room, built to impress people who already had everything. Then silence. Real silence. Claire blinked. Tried again. Another beep. Louder. Or maybe the room had gone still enough that it landed in your chest. Declined, no worse. Inactive. 14 guests. A photographer hovering too close. White roses. A champagne tower nobody had paid for yet, and my wife holding a card that no longer belonged to anything. She looked at me then. For 7 years, 3 months, and 11 days, I had been the one who fixed it, covered it, paid it, smoothed it over before it could become something ugly. Not this time. I leaned back in my chair, calm, hands folded, watching. Try it again, I said. She did. Same result. I didn't move. I didn't apologize. I didn't reach for my wallet. And for the first time in years, I let the room see exactly what happens when I stop saving them. My name is Nolan Hale. I'm 39 years old, and I hold a controlling stake in a regional commercial development firm called Vale Meridian. My father built it over 2 decades slow, disciplined, brick by brick. I expanded it after he died, not by taking risks, but by eliminating them. That's what I'm good at. Structure, pressure, containment. I'm not a volatile man. I don't raise my voice. I don't throw things. I don't make scenes in public or private. Most people who know me would describe me as steady, reliable, hard to read, maybe, but fair. What they wouldn't say, what I didn't admit, even to myself for a long time, is how far I was willing to go to avoid conflict. Not because I was afraid of it, because I believed that, if you handled things quietly, if you absorbed enough of the impact, you could keep everything intact. Marriage, family, reputation. The illusion that things were working the way they were supposed to. That belief carried me a long way. Far enough that by the time I understood what was actually happening, I was already standing inside it. That dinner, the one with the dead card, the silence, the look on Claire's face, that wasn't a moment of impulse. It was the end of something, and you don't get to an ending like that without a long road behind it. A quiet one. A patient one. The kind that doesn't look like damage while you're living inside it. But it was. And if you want to understand why I let that room go silent instead of fixing it like I always had, you have to start at the beginning. I met Claire at a fundraising dinner in 2017. She had that kind of presence people don't question. Not loud, not performative, just assured. The kind that makes you assume there's substance behind it. Even if you haven't seen any yet. She was easy to talk to. Warm without being intrusive. She listened in a way that made you feel like your words were landing somewhere that mattered. We dated for a little over a year. Then, we got engaged. A small ceremony outside Austin. Nothing extravagant, just controlled, deliberate, the way I preferred things. We moved into my house in West University, a place I'd bought in my early 30s, held in a separate trust my father insisted on before he passed. Claire never argued about that. Said it made sense, said she respected it. Claire said a lot of things made sense. I met her sister, Sabrina, that first Christmas. She was 35, polished in a way that felt curated down to the detail. Everything about her, from the way she dressed to the way she spoke, felt like it had been practiced in front of a mirror and approved. She owned a boutique brand called Mercer & Company. It sold elevated essentials, which, as far as I could tell, meant well-lit displays, expensive packaging, and margins that only worked if someone else absorbed the losses. She kissed me on both cheeks when we met. "You're exactly what Claire needed," she said, smiling like she'd already done the math on me. At the time, I took it as a compliment. That was my first mistake. The second came about 6 weeks later. Christmas Eve, Claire's mother's kitchen. I was carving a roast, trying to stay out of the way of 3 women who all seemed to operate on a shared rhythm I hadn't learned yet. Sabrina leaned against the counter beside me. "Hey," she said. Casual. Like we were already on that level. "Can you float me $6,000 until February? I went a little aggressive on inventory this season." She said it like it was nothing. Like asking for a ride. When I didn't answer immediately, she smiled, light. "Easy. Family," she added. Just one word. Left hanging there. I brought it up to Claire that night. She was already half asleep, turning away from me. "She'll pay you back," she said, "and even if she doesn't, it's not a big deal. She's under pressure." It wasn't a big deal. That's what I told myself when the transfer went through. It wasn't a big deal when the repayment never came. It wasn't a big deal when, a year later, it was flights to Aspen because her card got flagged, or the vendor deposit that had to clear today, or the whole launch collapses, or the payroll gap. Always temporary, always urgent, always framed like saying no would cost more than saying yes. The hardest part wasn't Sabrina. People like her are consistent, predictable, if you're willing to see it. The hardest part was Claire, because every time I hesitated, every time I tried to draw a line, she softened it. Don't make it transactional. She's my sister. You know she's not like you with money. And the one she used when she needed it to land. Are you really going to make me choose between you and my family? She never said it before she'd already chosen. So, I adjusted. I told myself I was being patient, that I was being supportive, that this was what stability looked like from the outside, someone absorbing the pressure so everything else could keep moving. What I was actually doing, I just didn't have the language for it yet. The pattern didn't arrive all at once. That would have been easier. Easier to name, easier to reject, easier to stop. Instead, it built itself in increments small enough to justify, frequent enough to normalize. Year 1, it was the 6,000, a favor, a bridge, something temporary. Year 2, it was flights to Aspen. Claire told me Sabrina's card had been flagged during a vendor trip, and she was stuck, embarrassed, stranded, the way Claire described it. It's just easier if you handle it, she said, already reaching for her phone like the decision had been made. So, I handled it. Year 3, a supplier deposit. Just to secure the line, Sabrina said over coffee, sliding a tablet across the table like we were partners instead of something far less defined. The payment clears next week. It didn't. Year 4. Payroll. Temporary gap, she said, smiling in that polished way that made everything sound like a rounding error instead of a problem. You know how scaling works. I did know how scaling worked. That wasn't it. By then, I had started to notice something else. Not the request, that part was consistent, but the way she reacted after I agreed. Not gratitude, not relief. Satisfaction. Like something had clicked into place exactly the way she expected it to. Like a door she had already assumed would open. Claire never challenged it. She reframed it. She's building something. She just needs momentum. You think too short-term sometimes. I think in numbers, in timelines, in exposure, in what happens if the next thing doesn't come through. But every time I tried to explain that, it got translated into something else. Cold, rigid, transactional. The words shifted just enough to make me sound like the problem. By year 5, the numbers weren't small anymore. Sabrina signed a lease for a larger retail space in River Oaks. I sat down with both of them, spread the projections out line by line. Walked them through why it didn't hold. Foot traffic assumptions were inflated. Inventory turnover didn't support the expansion. Cash flow wasn't stable enough to absorb the overhead. It wasn't complicated. It just wasn't what they wanted to hear. She needs the space to grow into, Claire said from across the table. Like growth itself would solve the math. Later that week, I found out my annual bonus had already been used to cover the lease shortfall. Not discussed, not approved, used. I asked Claire about it that night. She didn't deny it. You would have said no, she said simply. I remember standing there in the kitchen, one hand on the counter, the other still holding my phone, trying to process how casually that had been decided for me. You don't get to make that call, I said. Her expression shifted, not guilty, not defensive, annoyed. Why are you making this such a big deal? Because it was one. Because it kept becoming one. But every time I tried to articulate that, the conversation bent around me. You always do this. Turn everything into a negotiation. She's family, Nolan. Family. That word again. Always placed carefully. Always at the point in the conversation where refusing would make me the one breaking something. So, I adjusted again. I stopped arguing as much, stopped pushing back every time. Not because I agreed, because I was tired of what it cost to disagree. And once you stop pushing back, people notice. Not consciously. Maybe, but they feel the shift. The resistance softens. The friction disappears. The path clears. And they start moving through you instead of around you. By year 6, I wasn't being asked anymore. I was being informed. Sabrina's going to need help with inventory. We had to move some funds around. Don't worry. It's covered. Covered. By me, always by me. There's a specific kind of erosion that doesn't look like damage while it's happening. Nothing breaks all at once. Nothing explodes. You just wake up one day and realize the ground under you isn't yours anymore. That, the systems you built, the structure you rely on, the stability you thought you were maintaining, has been quietly redirected, repurposed, Used. And the worst part is, you helped, you signed off, you stayed quiet, you told yourself it was temporary, that it would even out, that it meant something, that it was loyalty. What it actually was, I was underwriting the erosion of my own life and calling it loyalty, and they let me, every step of the way. The morning it changed didn't feel different when it started. 6:12 a.m. coffee on the counter, Claire in the shower, my laptop open to the quarterly dashboard I reviewed every day without thinking. Routine, that's the thing about systems, you trust them until something breaks. The email almost got deleted. Subject line: collateral documentation updated, generic, automated. The kind of thing banks send when they rename a portal or adjust a policy no one reads. But I recognized the account suffix in the preview. Hale Investment Holdings. I opened it. Then I opened the attachment. Then I read it again. And then a third time. Slower. Because my brain wasn't accepting what my eyes were already confirming. Claire had signed a personal guarantee, $1.35 million. Northlake Private Lending. Purpose expansion capital for Mercer and Company. That part didn't surprise me. The next part did. Collateral schedule. Line 1, a block of my company shares. Line 2, a marital investment account tied directly to my distributions. And beneath it, a spousal consent page, with my signature on it. Not a rushed version. Not something sloppy or approximate. Clean, practiced, lifted from somewhere real and placed onto a document I had never seen. I remember the sound the refrigerator was making. Low, mechanical, constant. I remember the coffee turning bitter in my mouth. But the strongest thing I remember wasn't anger. It was clarity, that quiet, final kind that doesn't argue with you. I wasn't shocked. I was recognizing something I had been standing next to for years and refusing to name, because naming it would have required action. And action would have ended things. Claire came downstairs a few minutes later. Hair damp, barefoot, still moving through the morning like nothing had shifted. She kissed my temple as she passed. "Do you want eggs?" she asked, already opening the fridge. I turned the laptop toward her. "What is this?" She glanced at the screen. Just a second, long enough for the truth to pass across her face before it reset. "Why are you in that account?" she said. I held her there with my eyes. "You used my signature. It's not like that." Her tone changed before the sentence finished. Defensive, controlled, irritated, in that specific way people get when facts interrupt something they've already decided is handled. It was a timing issue. Northlake needed the packet turned around fast. "It's secured. It's temporary." "You forged my consent." "Don't call it that," she snapped. "You would have agreed." That landed harder than the rest. Not denial, assumption, like my approval was already hers to use. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Daniel's aware," she said quickly. "There might be a review on the shares, but it's standard." Daniel Hayes, my CFO, a man who did not casually become aware of anything. If Daniel knew. Documents had moved, timelines had been established. This had been in motion longer than I'd been told. "How long?" I asked. Claire set the milk down on the counter harder than necessary. "Nolan, please don't do this." "How long?" she exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "A few weeks. A few weeks. Several weeks of my name attached to a $1.35 million liability I never approved. Several weeks of my assets positioned as collateral in a deal I didn't authorize. Several weeks where she woke up next to me, moved through the house, spoke to me like everything was normal, and didn't say a word." "You don't get to make decisions like that for me," I said. Her expression hardened. "You're acting like I stole something." The sentence just sat there. Complete. Unqualified. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I had defended. Rationalized. Adjusted myself around. The one who had taught me, slowly and consistently, that pushing back would cost more than giving in. "You did," I said. She scoffed, turned away, like the conversation itself was the inconvenience. I stood there for another minute. Then I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and called the one person who would tell me exactly how bad this was, without trying to make it easier to swallow. Daniel. Daniel was already in the conference room when I walked in. Jacket off, sleeves rolled, laptop open, documents aligned in front of him with the kind of precision that meant he'd been there a while. He looked up the second I stepped through the door. "You saw it." Not a question. I closed the glass behind me. "You knew." He took off his glasses, set them down carefully. "I knew there was a pledge request involving your shares," he said, "and that external collateral review had been initiated." A pause. "I did not know your signature had been included on a spousal consent form until compliance forwarded the full packet this morning." That mattered, more than it should have. Maybe. But, in a situation built on quiet violations, Clarity felt like something solid. I sat across from him, walked me through it. Daniel didn't soften anything. Your father's shareholder agreement, he started, was written to prevent exactly this. No inherited voting block could be pledged to an external lender without full board disclosure, legal review, and verified spousal consent where applicable. He tapped the document in front of him. If those conditions are bypassed, the company has the right to force a redemption of the shares. I let that sit. And if the company doesn't exercise that right, an approved internal buyer can. He met my eyes. That would be you. 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Olivia Carr, 31st floor, downtown, glass walls, controlled light. The kind of office designed for conversations people don't want repeated. She had already reviewed everything. The forged consent, the collateral schedule, 7 years of account history. My prenuptial agreement. When she finally looked up, she didn't ask how I felt. She asked, "How much do you want to save?" It was such a precise question it caught me off guard, not emotionally. Structurally, the company, I said. My exposure, the house, a beat, my sanity. She nodded once, and the marriage. I looked down at the printed page in front of me. My signature, clean and practiced, sitting on something I had never agreed to. I think that answer's already been given, I said. From there, things didn't explode, they moved, quietly, methodically. Without emotion, Olivia filed notice with Northlake that the spousal consent was contested. That alone triggered an immediate review. Daniel notified the board chair. Compliance opened an internal investigation. Outside counsel was brought in. I redirected my income streams into a protected personal account under an LLC I had set up years ago and never expected to need. I removed Claire as an authorized user from anything tied to my distributions. Closed the black card linked to the joint discretionary line. Froze the household reserve account pending separation analysis, changed passcodes, access points, anything that assumed shared control, and then I went home. Every night. Like nothing had changed. That was the strangest part. Claire noticed something was different. I could see it in the way she watched me, but she misread it. Because she always had. She mistook quiet for compliance. Still asked if I wanted dinner. Still talked about Sabrina's stress like it was something we were managing together. Once things stabilize, she said one night, flipping through something on her phone. This will all make sense. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she say my name like she understood what she'd done. By Friday, the board met. Daniel and I presented operations first. Because numbers don't pause for personal failures. Then legal stepped in. Claire wasn't there. Didn't need to be. The violation was clear. The options were procedural. The vote was simple. Do you wish to exercise the internal buy option personally? The chair asked. I do, I said. No hesitation, no second thoughts. The motion passed unanimously. And for the first time since that email, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. After the board vote, everything accelerated, not outwardly, on the surface, nothing changed. Inside the system, everything did. Olivia moved first. Formal notice to Northlake confirming the spousal consent was contested. That triggered escalation protocols on their end. Legal review. Internal flags. Exposure reassessment. Daniel coordinated with compliance and outside counsel. Every document that had been quietly pushed through now had to stand up under scrutiny. Most of them couldn't. I started moving my own pieces, not emotionally. Operationally. Income streams were rerouted fully into the protected account. Anything tied to shared access was severed. Claire's authorization revoked. The joint discretionary line closed. The black card she treated like a solution deactivated. Household reserves frozen pending separation structuring. Passwords changed, security updated. Entry points narrowed. Nothing dramatic, just removal. Access, 1 point at a time. Olivia drafted the separation documents in parallel. Clean, precise, no unnecessary language, no room for interpretation. I reviewed them once, approved them. Didn't think about it again. During the day, I worked. Meetings, calls, site reviews, numbers. Everything that had always been stable stayed stable. At night, I went home, same routine. Dinner at the island, silence. Occasional conversation that moved across the surface of things without ever touching what was actually happening underneath. Claire sensed something. Not the specifics, but the shift. You can tell when someone stops engaging with you the way they used to. Stops negotiating, stops reacting, stops offering you the chance to correct course. She noticed that. She just didn't understand what it meant, because in her experience, silence had always meant delay. And delay had always meant forgiveness. You've been distant, she said one night. standing in the doorway while I was reviewing something on my laptop. Work, I said. That was enough for her, it always had been. She nodded, accepted it, moved on. From the couch, from behind her phone, she kept talking about Sabrina, inventory delays, investor interest. Once this expansion stabilizes, she said, everything's going to look different. Not once did she mention the loan. Not once did she acknowledge the signature. Not once did she step into the reality she had created. It was like watching someone continue a conversation that had already ended by Monday. Northlake issued a notice of default to Sabrina's company. Unauthorized collateral. Contested consent? Misrepresentation. By Tuesday, the funding structure for the share transfer was finalized. By Wednesday, closing documents were in motion. Every step documented. Every step aligned. Every step irreversible. And still at home. Nothing changed. Claire kissed my cheek when she left in the morning. Asked if I wanted anything on her way back. Talked about dinner plans, social events, optics, always optics. By Thursday afternoon, the closing was scheduled for that night. Same night as Sabrina's anniversary dinner. Of course it was. She had been planning it for months. Private dining room, investor guests, photographer. A staged moment where the check would arrive. And Claire, through me, would make it disappear. A performance, that's what it was always meant to be. At 3:47 p.m., I stepped into the bedroom, pulled my jacket from the hanger, reached into the inside pocket, took out the new card linked to my personal account, held it there for a second, then set it aside, and replaced it with the old one, the inactive card from the closed line. I slid it into the exact position Claire always reached for without looking, closed the pocket, adjusted the sleeve, looked at my reflection once. There's a point, right before something irreversible, where everything becomes very clear, not emotional, not dramatic, just settled. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and more importantly, I knew exactly what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to fix it. Not this time. Sabrina didn't host dinners. She staged them. The private dining room at Laurent House was arranged like a brand campaign, pretending to be a celebration. White florals, low candlelight, custom place cards with her logo pressed into the paper, like it meant something permanent. A champagne tower sat near the bar. A photographer drifted along the edges of the room, pretending not to aim for moments that had already been planned. Investors, friends, people who liked proximity to things that looked expensive. Claire moved through it all like she belonged there. Cream silk dress, controlled smile, touching shoulders, adjusting details, managing perception. When she reached me, her hand rested briefly against my chest. There you are, she said softly. You look perfect. Perfect. That word always showed up when something needed to be presented. Sabrina followed a second later, perfume arriving before she did. There's my favorite partner, she said, kissing the air near my cheek. You got Claire's message about the payment moment, right? Of course she assumed I had. She didn't wait for an answer. Good, she said, already turning away. Don't let me down. It was said lightly. It wasn't light. Dinner unfolded in courses. Crudo, lobster, steak. Wine poured aggressively enough to feel like commentary. At one point, someone across the table asked how involved I was in the family ventures. Before I could answer, Sabrina cut in. Nolan's the one who keeps everything running, she said, smiling. We'd all be lost without him. Polite laughter. I nodded once, said nothing. It sounded like praise. It wasn't. It was positioning. Later. Claire leaned closer, her voice low enough that only I could hear. Just don't make tonight complicated. Okay. Not please. Not are you okay with this? Just a quiet directive, wrapped in softness. I looked at her. At the ease with which she said it. At the assumption underneath it. Of course, I said. She relaxed instantly. That was always the pattern. Agreement restored comfort. Compliance restored balance. Sabrina stood as dessert approached. Glass raised, smile practiced. To family, she said. To loyalty. And to people who show up when it matters. Her eyes flicked toward me. The room followed. The photographer shifted closer. And then she nodded toward the leather folder placed beside Claire. Come on, she said lightly. Let's make it official. $31,400. Announced like part of the performance. Claire didn't hesitate. She reached for my jacket where it hung on the back of the chair. Familiar movement. Unthinking. Routine. Her fingers slipped inside the inner pocket, exactly where they always went. She pulled the card out without looking. Didn't need to. She already knew what she expected to find. I watched her hand it to the server. watched the confidence in the motion, watched the certainty. And for a brief second I could see exactly how this had always worked from the outside. Clean, effortless, reliable. The man who makes problems disappear. The woman who never has to think about how. The room leaned forward without meaning to. Waiting. Expecting. Everything aligned around a single moment. The payment, the proof, the performance. And I sat there perfectly still knowing this was the last time any of it would look like that. The server inserted the card. A second passed. Then, a sharp, flat tone. Not loud, but wrong. You could feel it more than hear it. Claire smiled tighter. Try it again, she said, light. Almost amused, like this was a glitch she'd seen before and would smooth over in seconds. The server nodded. Reinserted the card. Another beat. Then the word appeared. Inactive. It didn't land all at once. It moved across the table. From the terminal. To the server's expression, to Claire's face, and then to everyone else. The photographer didn't lower his camera. That was the first thing I noticed. Claire let out a small laugh. Okay. Don't do that thing where you pretend the machine's broken, she said, reaching slightly toward the terminal. Just run it again, ma'am, the server said carefully. It's showing the account is inactive, not declined, not flagged, inactive. Claire looked down at the card like it had betrayed her personally. Then she looked at me. Too fast, Nolan, she said, still smiling for the room. What's going on? I folded my hands in front of me, kept my voice level. Go ahead, I said. Try it again. She did. Same result. The room shifted, subtle, but undeniable. Conversations that had been half-started stopped entirely. People leaned back just enough to create distance from something they didn't want to be part of, but couldn't look away from. Sabrina's smile didn't disappear. It adjusted, tightened at the edges. Don't make this weird, she said, a soft laugh under it, but her eyes already sharpening. Just use another card, another card. Like that was how this always worked, like there was always another layer to reach into. Claire leaned closer to me now, her voice lower. Do you have a backup? There it was. Not what happened, not why isn't this working, just fix it. I looked at her, really looked this time, at how quickly she moved past the problem and into expectation, at how natural it felt to her. No, I said. One word. Flat. She blinked, like the language itself didn't register. Across the table, Sabrina shifted in her seat. Okay, she said. Still playing it off, still holding the room together with tone alone. Let's not turn this into a whole thing, Nolan. Just handle it. Handle it. The phrase landed heavier than anything else that had been said. For years, that's what I did. Handled it. Quietly. Efficiently. Without making anyone uncomfortable, I leaned back slightly in my chair. Do you want me to explain why the account is inactive? I asked. No one answered, not immediately. Because suddenly, this wasn't about a card. Claire's voice came out sharper this time. Nolan, last month, I said, cutting across her just enough to stop the rhythm she was trying to reestablish. You used my signature on a spousal consent form. The words didn't echo, they landed, heavy, final. Sabrina's expression changed first, not surprise, recognition. Claire's face went still. Completely still. You pledged my shares, I continued, my voice steady, measured, and a marital investment account as collateral for a $1.35 million loan. Someone at the far end of the table shifted in their chair. The photographer lowered his camera. Finally. That's not, Claire started. That's exactly what it is, I said. No volume, no anger, just correction. Sabrina leaned forward now. This is not the place for this, she said, her tone dropping the performance entirely. We are not doing this here. I glanced around the room. At the table she had built, the audience she had curated, the moment she had designed. You chose the place, I said. You chose the audience. Claire's jaw tightened. You're trying to humiliate me. There it was. Not you're wrong. Not, I didn't do it. Just, you're embarrassing me. I held her gaze. You used my name to secure debt I never agreed to, I said. This stopped being private the second you did that. Sabrina let out a short, sharp breath. You're twisting this, she said. Everyone knew you'd agree. Everyone. I looked at her. You knew I asked. A pause. Just long enough. Claire cut in. Enough, she said, her voice tightening. We are not discussing this in front of your company is in default, I said. That did it. That broke the room. Sabrina blinked. What? The lender issued notice, I said. Contested consent, unauthorized collateral. Misrepresentation. The words weren't dramatic. They were procedural. And that made them worse. Claire's color drained. You hired a lawyer, she said. Yes. When the morning I found the documents, Her laugh came out brittle. You went straight to that. I went to the truth. Silence again. Thicker this time. Heavier. I reached for my phone, typed one line. Confirm closing. It rang almost immediately. I answered. Daniel. His voice came through clean. Precise. We've closed, he said. Wire confirmed at 8:42 p.m. Board signatures are logged. Your acquisition of the redeemed block is complete. Claire stared at the phone like it had turned against her. Sabrina's mouth opened slightly. What does that mean? She asked. It means, I said. Ending the call and setting the phone down. The shares you used without authorization have already been redeemed. Claire's voice dropped. You bought them. I protected them. That distinction mattered. Even if she didn't see it. You can't just... I can, I said. And I did. From the doorway, a new voice entered the room. Mr. Hale. Every head turned. Olivia stood there. Charcoal suit, leather folio, two people behind her. Order, walking into chaos. She moved toward the table without hesitation. Good evening, she said calmly. I have the executed closing memo, the petition, and service documents. Sabrina stood halfway out of her chair. You brought your lawyer here. Olivia didn't look at her. You created a public financial event, she said. The setting was already established. The process server stepped forward. Mr. Hale, he said to me first. Then corrected himself. Turning to Claire. You are hereby served. Claire didn't take the envelope, so he placed it on the table. Another envelope went to Sabrina. Notice of lender default, Olivia added. Any attempt to move assets after service may create additional liability. Sabrina's hand hovered over it. Didn't touch. For a moment. No one moved, no one spoke. And then Claire looked at me, not angry, not defensive, lost. You planned this, she said. Yes. You wanted to destroy me. I considered that. Actually considered it. No, I said. I wanted to stop you from destroying me. That was the first honest silence of the night. The kind that doesn't expect a response. The server was still there, holding the terminal. Waiting. I picked up my phone, selected the card linked to my personal account. Tapped approve. A soft tone. Clean. Finished. A collective breath moved through the room. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the card, the one Claire had used, set it down in front of her. This, I said, is the last dead thing of mine you'll ever try to spend. Then, I stood, buttoned my jacket, nodded once to Olivia, and walked toward the door. The room opened, not because I forced it, because something in me had closed, and everyone else could finally see it. Outside, the air felt different. Cooler than it had any right to be, or maybe I just noticed it for the first time. Olivia stepped out a few seconds after me, the door closing behind her with a quiet finality. You handled that well, she said. I let out a short breath. Not quite a laugh. Is that the standard review? I asked. It means you stayed clear, she said. Most people don't. I looked back through the glass. Gold light, movement, people already trying to reassemble the evening into something they could talk about later, without admitting what they just watched. I thought it would feel different, I said. Different how? Bigger? Louder? Olivia's expression softened. Just slightly. Relief rarely is, that was the word. Relief. Not victory. Not satisfaction, just less weight. The drive home was quiet. City lights sliding past, traffic moving like nothing had shifted anywhere else. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was exactly as I'd left it, still. Ordered. Familiar. I stepped inside. The air carried a faint scent of something floral left over, from an arrangement Claire had ordered days earlier. I set my keys down. Walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water. Then I turned toward the door that led to the garage, opened it. Boxes, stacked along the wall. Sabrina's inventory, clothing racks, packaging. Pieces of a business that had been living inside my space for over a year. Untouched. Unpaid for. Accepted. I stood there for a moment. Then I let out a quiet breath, because that, more than the dinner, more than the documents, more than the room full of witnesses, that was the shape of it. Everything that didn't belong to me, taking up space anyway. The next few weeks weren't dramatic. They were procedural, which, in its own way, was more final than anything that had happened in that restaurant. Olivia moved the separation filing forward without delay. Dates were set, disclosures requested, timelines established. Claire retained counsel. There was a brief attempt, quiet, almost cautious, to challenge occupancy of the house. It didn't last. Olivia sent over the trust documents, the prenup exhibits, the asset protections that had been in place long before Claire entered the picture. That ended it. Cleanly. At the firm. The transition was just as direct. Claire's access, whatever informal influence she had through proximity, disappeared overnight. Sabrina's company contracted. The expansion collapsed under its own weight once it had to operate within actual constraints. Smaller space, reduced inventory, fewer illusions. On the third Monday after the dinner, I took my seat at the board table. Not temporarily. Not as a placeholder. Permanently. No speeches, no acknowledgement beyond the updated agenda placed in front of me. Vanessa looked across the table once. "Let's begin," she said, and we did. That night, it rained. Light at first, then steady. I stopped at a grocery store on the way home. Bought salmon, lemons, a bottle of white wine I didn't have to justify to anyone. When I walked through the front door, the house felt different. Not empty. Unoccupied. There's a difference. I set the groceries on the counter. Cooked. Ate standing at the island. No conversation filling the space, no need to adjust tone, no need to anticipate reactions. Just quiet. Later. I stepped out onto the back porch. The rain had picked up. Soft against the concrete. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then stopped. The kind of silence that doesn't ask anything from you. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't need to guess. "You really think you won?" I read it once, then typed back. I think I stopped losing. I didn't wait for a response. Blocked the number before the typing dots could appear. Stood there for another minute. Listening to the rain, for the first time in years. Nothing in my life felt borrowed. Nothing felt negotiated. Nothing felt like it could be taken, reframed, and handed back to me as obligation. There was still work ahead. Attorneys, paperwork, the slow, unglamorous process of separating something that had once been presented as permanent. There would be versions of this story told in rooms I would never enter. In some, I'd be cold. In others, controlling. In all of them, the part where I stopped absorbing the cost would be the problem. Let them tell it. I knew what had happened. Not just in that room, but every time before it. Every quiet compromise, every reframing, every moment I chose to maintain something that was already eroding. And I knew what it meant to stop. No one tells you what freedom actually feels like, not the real version, the one that comes after you've spent years mistaking endurance for strength and compromise for character. It isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with music or momentum. There's no moment where everything clicks into place and stays there. It's quieter than that. Smaller. More precise. It looks like a lock that only answers to your key. A bill you pay because you chose to, not because someone positioned you into proving your worth. A garage you can walk through without turning sideways. A kitchen that belongs to the man standing in it. It looks like space. Not just physical space, but mental space. Where decisions don't have to pass through anyone else's expectations before they become real. Where silence isn't something you manage. It's something you own. I didn't get out clean. No one does. There are still documents, conversations, residual damage that takes time to settle. But the difference now is that nothing in my life moves without my consent. Nothing gets redefined and handed back to me as obligation. Nothing wears the language of family while functioning like extraction. That's the part that matters, not what I lost, not even what I kept. Just this: I know exactly where the line is now. And I don't step back over it for anyone. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, you already know how this ends. This story is created by the Fish Tells Stories team, for entertainment purposes only. Do not replicate or apply under any circumstances.